You wake up. You step out of bed, walk to the kitchen, and test your blood sugar. It's high. Again. And the most frustrating part? You barely ate anything after dinner last night. You did everything right. You skipped the dessert. You avoided the late-night snacking. You even went for a brief walk after your evening meal. Yet, your fasting numbers tell a completely different story. The glucometer flashes a number that makes you feel like you are failing, even when you know you are trying your absolute hardest for. Margaret, a retired school teacher we've spoken with, this was her exact reality. Every single morning, she would look at her fasting numbers and feel a crushing sense of defeat. If this sounds familiar, you are not alone. For millions of adults over the age of 60, this morning frustration is a daily reality. But what if the problem isn't what you are doing before bed? What if the problem is what your body is doing while you are fast asleep? To understand why this happens, we have to look deep inside the body, specifically at what happens between 2 a.m. and 8 a.m. This phenomenon is so common, so universally experienced by individuals managing glucose, that the American Diabetes Association has a specific clinical name for it, the dawn phenomenon. While you are deeply asleep, your body is essentially preparing you to wake up. It operates on an internal circadian clock. As morning approaches, the body releases a massive surge of counter-regulatory hormones, primarily cortisol, glucagon, growth hormone, and epinephrine. These hormones serve a critical evolutionary purpose. They send a direct chemical signal to your liver, instructing it to literally dump its stored glucose into your bloodstream. This is meant to give you the energy to open your eyes, stand up, and start your day without needing to immediately eat breakfast. But if you have insulin resistance or type 2 diabetes, a major breakdown occurs in this communication chain. Your body either doesn't produce enough insulin to handle this sudden glucose dump, or your cells simply cannot use the insulin effectively to shuttle that glucose out of your bloodstream. The result is an overflow of sugar. You wake up with elevated fasting blood sugar, entirely regardless of how perfectly you ate the night before. So, how do we tackle this? While medication adjustments with your doctor and endocrinologist are always the most critical step, and nothing we discuss today should replace prescribed insulin or oral medications, there are gentle, natural evening routines that can support your body's glucose management. Today, we are going to explore 5 science-backed bedtime drinks that may help gently lower those morning fasting numbers. These are not miracle cures, and they will not fix a poor diet. But as clinical adjuncts, they show remarkable promise. Let's look at the first drink on our list, and arguably the most famous, apple cider vinegar. Imagine sitting down with a small diluted glass of vinegar before bed. It might not sound like the most delicious or comforting nightcap. For Margaret, the idea of drinking vinegar was initially repulsive, but after struggling with morning spikes that hovered near 160 milligrams per deciliter, she decided to try it. She started small, diluting it heavily. Within a few weeks, she noticed something incredible. Her morning numbers were beginning to stabilize in the 120s. Margaret's experience is not just an anecdote, it is heavily backed by clinical literature. According to a landmark pilot trial published in the prestigious journal Diabetes Care, adults with well-controlled type 2 diabetes who consume just 2 tablespoons of apple cider vinegar at bedtime, along with a tiny piece of cheese, saw a highly measurable reduction in their waking fasting glucose. A more recent, massive 2025 dose-response meta-analysis of controlled trials published in Complementary Medicine further confirmed this. The researchers found that apple cider vinegar reduced fasting blood sugar by an average of 22 milligrams per deciliter across the board, and even lowered hemoglobin A1C by approximately 1.5 percentage points. The American Heart Association also explicitly acknowledges that daily consumption can produce a small but measurable reduction in fasting glucose, placing this humble pantry staple squarely in the realm of evidence-based adjunct therapy. But how does a simple fermented cider achieve such a profound physiological effect? The magic lies in acetic acid, the primary active, pungent compound in vinegar. When you consume acetic acid, it works on multiple fronts within your digestive and metabolic systems. First, it significantly slows down gastric emptying. This means any food remaining in your stomach leaves much more slowly, preventing a sharp, sudden spike in blood sugar. Second, acetic acid directly interferes with the digestive enzymes in your gut that break down complex starches, essentially blocking a portion of carbohydrate digestion from ever occurring. But most importantly, for the overnight period, acetic acid appears to improve peripheral glucose uptake in your muscle cells. By dampening the evening glucose exposure and improving how your muscles absorb sugar, it helps keep your insulin and glucose levels steady throughout the night. This steady baseline acts as a buffer, powerfully counteracting the aggressive hormonal surge of the dawn phenomenon. If you want to try this, the approach must be gentle and extremely careful. The acidity of raw vinegar is incredibly high and can be destructive if mishandled. Never, under any circumstances, drink it straight or take it like a shot. The clinically recommended method is to take 1 to 2 tablespoons and dilute it in a large glass of at least 8 ounces or 200 milliliters of water. Drink it shortly before bed. To protect your delicate tooth enamel from the harsh acidity, you must always rinse your mouth out thoroughly with plain water afterward. Furthermore, do not brush your teeth immediately after drinking it, as brushing acid-softened enamel can permanently erode your teeth. Wait at least 30 minutes before brushing. Moving to our second drink, we look to the microbiome, kefir. Your gut microbiome is a complex, sprawling ecosystem of trillions of bacteria, fungi, and viruses. As we age past 60, this microbiome often loses its diversity and richness. This loss of diversity directly leads to a state of low-grade systemic inflammation. And in the medical world, systemic inflammation is a primary driver of insulin resistance. Your cells become inflamed and essentially lock their doors, refusing to let insulin bring glucose inside. Kefir is an ancient fermented milk drink that acts as a profound remedy for this. It is absolutely packed with live probiotic bacteria and beneficial yeasts, far more diverse and potent than standard grocery store yogurt. A rigorous randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled clinical trial involving 60 adults with type 2 diabetes sought to test this exactly. The researchers found that consuming kefir over an 8-week period significantly lowered both fasting blood glucose and hemoglobin A1C when compared to patients who merely drank conventional, unfermented milk. A massive 2021 systematic review and meta-analysis of 6 separate trials further supported this finding. The aggregated data concluded that kefir consumption significantly reduced fasting blood sugar by about 10 milligrams per deciliter on average. When you drink kefir before bed, the live, active probiotics survive the journey through your stomach acid and begin to populate your intestines. They actively modulate the gut microbiota and reinforce the intestinal barrier, preventing endotoxins from leaking into your bloodstream. This drastically reduces systemic inflammation, which in turn cools down your cells and reduces insulin resistance. Furthermore, the fermentation process of kefir produces vital compounds called short-chain fatty acids. These fatty acids travel directly to your liver and muscles, acting as signaling molecules that dramatically improve glucose uptake and hepatic insulin sensitivity. Because kefir also contains a modest, healthy amount of dietary fat and high-quality protein, consuming a small glass in the evening provides a slow, sustained energy release. This prevents your blood sugar from crashing in the middle of the night, a crash that would otherwise trigger a massive rebound spike known as the Somoji effect. For a bedtime routine, a small portion, about 4 to 8 ounces of plain, unsweetened kefir is ideal. It is absolutely crucial to avoid flavored, fruit-blended, or sweetened varieties. The added sugars in commercial kefir will completely defeat the purpose, spike your glucose instantly, and worsen your morning numbers. If you are lactose intolerant, you might find kefir surprisingly gentle, as the bacteria actually consume and break down much of the lactose during the fermentation process. However, a major caveat: if you have chronic kidney disease, please consult your nephrologist or primary care doctor, as the protein and potassium content in dairy products must be carefully monitored and managed to protect your kidney function. Our third drink shifts away from the digestive tract and entirely toward the nervous system: chamomile tea. Think of the peaceful, grounding ritual of brewing a hot cup of herbal tea. You sit in your favorite chair, the house is quiet, and you let the warmth seep into your hands. For older adults dealing with the chronic daily stress of managing a condition like diabetes, sleep is often elusive. Margaret often described her nights as a series of fragmented naps, waking up constantly to check the clock, worried about her morning numbers. And as we now know, poor sleep is a direct biological enemy of healthy blood sugar. Chamomile is an ancient botanical remedy, naturally completely caffeine-free, and it contains powerful, highly active flavonoids. The most notable of these is a compound called apigenin. Apigenin is fascinating because it physically crosses the blood-brain barrier and binds to specific receptors in your brain, the exact same GABA receptors that are targeted by powerful prescription anti-anxiety medications. This produces a mild, natural, and highly effective sedative effect, lowering your central nervous system's anxiety and helping you fall into a deep, restorative sleep. But what does sleep architecture have to do with blood sugar? Everything. When you are stressed, anxious, or sleep-deprived, your body perceives a threat. It responds by pumping out cortisol, the primary stress hormone. High overnight cortisol levels instruct your liver to aggressively release more glucose into the blood and simultaneously makes your muscle cells highly resistant to insulin. By improving your sleep quality, increasing your deep sleep phases, and reducing evening psychological stress, chamomile tea indirectly lowers your overnight cortisol levels. This hormonal dampening is what ultimately helps keep your morning glucose in check. A clinical trial published in the journal Nutrition involving 64 adults with type 2 diabetes put this to the test. The participants consumed chamomile tea daily for 8 weeks. The researchers found that the chamomile group significantly reduced their fasting, insulin levels, vastly improved their insulin resistance scores, and even showed improved antioxidant status compared to the control group. The Cleveland Clinic also strongly recommends chamomile as a primary bedtime tea to reduce anxiety, calm the nervous system, and improve overall sleep architecture. To make this part of your routine, it is incredibly simple. Steep 1 bag of high-quality, pure chamomile tea in hot water for 5 to 10 minutes to fully extract the apigenin. Drink it about 30 to 60 minutes before you plan to go to sleep. Ensure you do not add honey, agave, or sugar. Even natural sweeteners will trigger an insulin response. While chamomile is generally very safe and universally tolerated, if you are currently taking prescription blood thinners or anticoagulants, or if you have severe allergies to plants in the daisy or ragweed family, you should exercise caution and consult your doctor. Drink number 4 introduces a famous warming spice, cinnamon herbal tea. Cinnamon is far more than a baking ingredient. It contains highly active, potent polyphenols, specifically a compound known as cinnamaldehyde. When these compounds enter your systemic circulation, they go to work directly on the surface of your cells. They actually improve the phosphorylation of your insulin receptors. In simple terms, they repair the broken doorbell on your cells, making them highly sensitive and immediately responsive to the insulin you do have. Beyond the cellular level, these polyphenols also act in the gut to physically inhibit intestinal glucose absorption, meaning less sugar enters your bloodstream from the food you ate at dinner. The clinical backing for cinnamon is extensive. A major meta-analysis of 8 randomized controlled trials found that cinnamon intake was associated with a statistically significant reduction in fasting blood glucose, averaging a drop of nearly 9 milligrams per deciliter in people with type 2 diabetes and prediabetes. While the American Diabetes Association rightly notes that cinnamon should never replace standard medical therapy or insulin, the evidence undeniably shows it can offer a modest, measurable, and highly consistent benefit as an evening adjunct. You do not need expensive, highly processed supplement capsules to harness this metabolic power. You can simply steep 1 whole cinnamon stick, or half a teaspoon of high-quality ground cinnamon, in hot water for 10 to 15 minutes. This creates a warm, deeply flavorful, zero-calorie drink that is perfect for winding down in the evening. However, there is a critical distinction to make. You must seek out Ceylon cinnamon, often labeled as true cinnamon. The much more common and cheaper cassia cinnamon, found in most grocery stores, contains a compound called coumarin. In very large or daily doses, coumarin can be toxic to the liver. For a daily bedtime tea, Ceylon cinnamon is the absolute safest and most effective choice. Finally, our 5th and perhaps most medically fascinating drink, fenugreek seed water. Fenugreek seeds are an ancient staple in Eastern medicine, incredibly rich in unique soluble fibers and specialized compounds called saponins. When you take these hard seeds and soak them in water, they release this thick, mucilaginous fiber. When you drink this water, the fiber coats your digestive tract. This thick, viscous barrier dramatically slows down the mechanical digestion and absorption of carbohydrates. It acts almost like a physical sponge, preventing sudden aggressive surges in blood sugar. Furthermore, specific, rare amino acids found uniquely in fenugreek, such as 4-hydroxysilucine, may actually act directly on the beta cells of your pancreas, stimulating them to secrete insulin much more efficiently in response to glucose. The scientific validation for fenugreek is robust. A comprehensive 2024 systematic review of multiple trials highlighted significant, repeated reductions in fasting blood glucose and hemoglobin A1C levels when fenugreek was used consistently. An official National Institutes of Health evidence review also concluded that fenugreek seeds produce undeniable beneficial effects on glycemic control in persons with diabetes, noting its powerful ability to blunt post-meal glucose spikes and lower overall fasting numbers. To prepare this traditional drink, take 1 to 2 teaspoons of whole fenugreek seeds and let them soak in a small glass of water for several hours, or ideally overnight. Because fenugreek can be quite potent and highly effective at lowering blood sugar, if you are already taking prescription glucose-lowering medications like sulfonylureas or insulin, you must monitor your numbers extremely closely. Combining fenugreek with these medications can lead to hypoglycemia, where your blood sugar drops dangerously low. Always coordinate with your physician before adding fenugreek to your daily regimen. If we have to look at the entire landscape of clinical research and declare a winner, the single drink with the most robust, targeted, and undeniable evidence for lowering morning blood sugar specifically, it is apple cider vinegar. The dedicated specific bedtime trials, the strong, irrefutable meta-analyses, and the deeply understood biological mechanisms make it the absolute most evidence-backed option for addressing the dawn phenomenon. Chamomile, while a wonderful soothing botanical for sleep architecture, has the weakest direct evidence for morning blood sugar reduction, as its glycemic effects are largely indirect and heavily dependent on reducing stress rather than directly manipulating glucose uptake. Ultimately, the goal is not to find a magic bullet or a secret cure at the bottom of a teacup. The goal is to find sustainable, healthy, scientifically validated habits that support your body's changing physiology as you age. Always work with your primary healthcare provider or endocrinologist before starting any new herbal or dietary regimen, especially if you take prescription medications. Managing morning blood sugar is a complex, frustrating puzzle, but with the right tools, the right science, and the right routines, it is a puzzle you can absolutely solve.